Our government is failing us. It seems like every time the government needs to step up to the plate to help out the working class, there is an issue.
So after everything is said and done, all of this comes down to one simple fact. Will Senator McConnell, the Republican leader of the U.S. Senate, allow this body to vote on a bill which will provide $2,000 per person to working class families all across this country? That's what this whole debate is about.
Now, for several days, we've heard some senators say Congress must send more cash to high-earning households who haven't seen any income disruption.
Working class people that make up to $75K are the people who work the front lines of our economy. These people need help. Maybe you're still cozy with your $223K, Mitch McConnell.
Experts from across the political spectrum agree that our colleague from Vermont is dead wrong on this. Socialism for rich people is a terrible way to help the American families that are actually struggling.
When I watch this clip, it makes me wonder why Republicans in Congress don't want to help Americans, and how socialism is somehow the excuse. I know this might make inflation worse, but inflation's already supposed to be bad in the coming years. Even Donald Trump thinks Americans deserve more.
However, the bill they are now planning to send back to my desk is much different than anticipated. It really is a disgrace. I am asking Congress to amend this bill and increase the ridiculously low $600 to $2,000 or $4,000 for a couple.
Just saying socialism for the rich seems like a pretty vague reasoning to deny all Americans $2,000 during a pandemic. I see numbers like the almost $1 billion that Mike Bloomberg spent on a failed campaign and wonder if he had just took half of that and divided it amongst all 331 million American citizens. Every American would get $1.5 million. To think if they just took the same percentage of taxes out of his paychecks as they do ours. We could probably afford universal free healthcare for all and 300 tanks in each police department.
212.
And FYI, $1 billion to Mike Bloomberg is less than 2% of his net worth. To put that in perspective, the church recommends that you donate 15% of your income to it, but I doubt Mike Bloomberg is a God-fearing man. The funny thing is, his LinkedIn account says he's a philanthropist under his job description, but this is not a Mike Bloomberg rant. The real question is, why is socialism used as a scapegoat? When I was under the assumption that Social Security fits under the category of socialism quite well. Social Security, you know that thing that most Americans end up relying on because they have no retirement plan? The idea behind Social Security is that young people pay a small portion of what they make into the Social Security agency, and the agency uses that money to pay old people until they die. The truth is, the Social Security agency is negative and has to borrow from a trust fund. I think this is because rich people don't pay enough taxes and old people live too long. I was gonna make a COVID joke, but I think it's a little bit too soon for all that. It seems like every time socialism is mentioned, it is used to describe the working class interests. And the working class interests are in direct contrast with the ruling class. When I used to work at a coffee shop, I noticed that when the CEO would step out of his limousine to see the storefront, everyone would act different. They would smile more and move twice as fast. Everyone from the manager that made $60K to the baristas that made $20K. I wonder if this is the same feeling that peasants got when the lord of the lands they worked came around. Or was it more like the relationship between patricians and slaves in ancient Rome? Before we discuss how socialism is misused, let's define it. Socialism is a political and economic theory of social organization which advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned and regulated by the community as a whole. With this definition, you would think we already live in a socialist society. The community picks people who they think have their interests in mind, and those people make decisions on their behalf. But in our system, lobbying is allowed. So whoever has the most money can be heard the loudest, even if their opinions contrast the majority. This is how 2/3 of Americans think that weed should be federally legal, but it's still illegal. I'll let Bernie reiterate why socialism for the rich is the current system of America.
Debate it. Now, I hear Senator Thune and Senator McConnell before him talk about this bill being socialism for the rich, which I got to tell you, I find, Mr. President, somewhat hysterical, because that's an issue I have been talking about for many, many years. And I am very delighted that my conservative Republican friends now recognize that we do have socialism for the rich. To paraphrase Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said that we live in a society where we have socialism for the rich and rugged individualism for the poor. King was right. But despite what my Republican colleagues are saying, truth is that according to the Tax Policy Center, the top 5% of Americans, the wealthiest people in our country, would receive less than 1% of the benefits of these direct payments. But while we are on the subject of socialism for the rich, which my Republican friends have suddenly become very concerned about, let me talk about the Trump tax proposal that was pushed very hard by Senator McConnell and the Republican leadership, and where I think every Republican voted for it. You want to talk about socialism for the rich? It is not the bill that puts $2,000 into working class hands all over this country. That ain't socialism for the rich. This is socialism for the rich in that bill. Amazon, oh, by the way, I must say this if I may, we were quoting the liberal Washington Post owned by Jeff Bezos, the wealthiest guy in the world. So here is Jeff Bezos' company, Amazon, and they received a tax rebate. They paid nothing in 2018 in federal taxes. That's a corrupt tax system to begin with. But then on top of that, they received $129 million as a tax rebate. That, Senator Thune, is what socialism for the rich. In fact, this particular company is owned by the richest guy in the world. You gave him a $129 million rebate. But it's not just Amazon. Delta Airlines also paid nothing in federal taxes in 2018, and yet they received a $187 million rebate from that particular bill. Chevron, helping to destroy our planet with their carbon emissions, $181 million in a rebate. That, my friends, is what socialism for the rich is about. Socialism for the rich is not, in the midst of this terrible pandemic, putting a $2,000 check into the hands of working families. Now, I hear from our Republican friends that the economy is doing better, but I would like to just read to them a few of the stories that I have received in my office. We ask people, simple question, how are you doing out there? What's going on in your lives? And we receive many, many thousands of responses from people in every state in this country. Just a few, just to bring some dose of reality here to the United States Senate, which often, in the midst of all of the campaign contributions coming in here from the rich, does not know what's going on in the real world. Here's the real world. Gentleman in Texas wrote, $2,000 is the difference between keeping our apartment and being evicted. Mother in Virginia wrote, $2,000 means I can afford to feed my 3 kids. Now, maybe we should give her a long lecture on macroeconomics and how well the stock market is doing. All she's worried about is feeding her 3 children. Woman in Wisconsin wrote, $2,000 would mean not having to choose between rent and groceries and not having to ration my partner's meds. Woman in Nevada wrote, it means paying my rent and getting life-saving treatment because I can't afford the $50 copay through my work insurance just to see my neurologist right now. Father in Florida wrote, quote, it would mean I could pay my bills. My electricity and phone are about to get shut off. I didn't have money for my son on Christmas, and I won't have money for his birthday on January 2nd. Father in New Jersey wrote, it would mean I could pay off credit card debt accumulated during this pandemic, feed my children, and pay my bills. Parent in Massachusetts wrote, it would mean that I could pay my rent and electricity and put food on the table. Woman in Missouri wrote, It would mean getting out of crushing debt. It would mean survival without daily fear. Someone in Texas wrote, it would mean I could actually put food in the fridge. Man in Maryland wrote, quote, it would mean I don't have to beg or go without food, shelter, and medicine. It would mean my family stays warm another couple of months and my dad gets proper treatment.
Senator, yield for a question.
The moral of the story is politicians need to stop disguising lies with words Americans don't know. Don't act like you can't help us because that would be socialism for the rich, when our system is socialism for the rich. At least tell us that we're not important because we're peasants. Alright guys, I didn't mean it to get that dark at the end, but it just kind of got that dark. But thanks for watching guys. I'm gonna get a Patreon out there and I'm trying to figure out what type of content I'm making, so...
He about to start the speech, come on, silence.